Well, Seb is here this afternoon to talk about the past 11 days of incredible athletics in front of over 1 million fans in the stadium and billions worldwide. It's probably also worth noting, and he doesn't know I'm going to say this, that today is the anniversary of him becoming double Olympic champion in LA. So Seb will deliver some opening remarks, and after he has concluded, we will open to the floor for questions, and I'm not sure what the first one will be. But as ever, if you can raise your hand, we will get a volunteer to come and bring the microphone to you. If you can state your name and your publication, and then ask your question. So Seb, for the final time at Paris 2024, I pass the baton to you.
Thank you, Jamie. And I didn't actually know it was the the anniversary, and thank you for carbon dating me this morning. 40 years ago, I guess I'm lucky to be here. Jamie, thank you. And I don't intend to, there's no long set piece presentation this morning or PowerPoint on AI or anything. This is really just a way of thanking you because you are really important to us. And I'm looking at a sea of specialist athletics writers here. I know that there are those of you who come here with other duties and other journalistic responsibilities, but specifically to the specialist writers, thank you, because you stick with us through thick and thin. And what we've witnessed in the last 11 days has been anything other than thin. This sport is the sport that keeps giving. It is the gift that keeps giving. And look, I would like to start by simply, because I know how hard it is to put a games on. I've chaired an organising committee through bid, through delivery, and then for 2 years of legacy. This is the toughest piece of project management that any city is ever confronted by in normal times. So I would really like to place on record, and possibly the only opportunity I have here in Paris before we all go back to our day jobs, to thank Tony Estanguet and his teams, who have been a very, very good organising committee. And Tony, I'm delighted, from active sport has made that transition. There aren't that many of us around that have done that job. It's an ageing experience, but I'd like to thank Tony for the extraordinary games that he and his teams have delivered, and together with the IOC sports team too, because there are challenges, and of course to John, who, as ever, deftly navigates our HQ teams through the delivery of a games. I think it's often overlooked that an international federation does have quite a set of arduous duties here. This is not a one-off, by the way. I mean, we have seen some extraordinary performances this week in athletics, but it isn't a one-off. This sport is on an extraordinary trajectory at the moment. Budapest, as you remember, last year was our best World Championships ever, and we're just building year on year. And look, athletics is a sport, like many sports, that is very reliant upon numbers and measurement. And so let me just give you a few numbers, both on the field of play and off the field of play. We've had 11 days of extraordinary, sumptuous athletics. We've had 195 countries that have competed. We've had obvious world records, 3 of them, Mondo Sydney and the US 4x4 mixed relays. We've had 13 Olympic records, and I'm sort of slightly smiling about that because 2 of those have come in the last 24 hours on the toughest marathon course that has yet been devised for an Olympic Games. 27 gold medals. A total of 27 countries with gold medals, a total of 43 countries winning medals, and 75. And this for me is a really important sign, a drumbeat of progress. 75 countries who have had a top 8 finish. Away from the field of play, but not that far away from the field of play, I guess, every seat for every session in that stadium has been filled. From the first morning through to the extraordinary scenes we witnessed last night. Off the field of play, really off the field of play, 1 million tickets, the most number of tickets ever sold for an athletics championships, and again packed houses on the road, 10, 12 deep this morning in various parts of the marathon course, and race walk too, with the views and the extraordinary backdrop. Jamie slightly took my thunder, but it pays to make sure we know what both of us are saying. I did slightly feel the globe wobbling the other night when I had Snoop Dogg one side of me and Simone Biles the other side, and trying to explain the finer points of 1,500 metre running. And I'm still smiling at the response from Simone, who looked at the track and said, I had no idea people ran that quickly. And I said, how do you think we feel when we're sitting at the side of a gymnastics auditorium? You know, how on earth do you do what you do? And it was, I'm going to say this, the sport became cool. It's the first time my kids have actually thought anything I've done on the planet has been cool. Let me just finish by making an observation here. I cannot remember a generation of more talented athletes. And when I say that, I make 2 points here. And I make it really respectfully, because we are no longer a sport about one person. And that one person was Herculean. That one person transformed the popularity of our sport for a very clear period of time, and he consistently did that, and that's obviously Usain Bolt. And the regular question that I've had from many of you, and it's a good question, is, you know, what would you do when Usain actually left the field? And I said, well, it's a little bit like the same question I'm guessing that boxing audiences and organisations were getting, you know, a few years ago when Muhammad Ali left. You don't replace Muhammad Ali, you don't replace Usain Bolt. But I did say, mark my words, other athletes will come through. And the way they've come through has been extraordinary. We've now got a greater bandwidth of talent across a broader range of disciplines than we've ever had in the sport. And I'm not going to belabor the names or the individuals or all those disciplines. You've watched it, you know, for the last 11 days. You know exactly what I'm saying. And if you really want the definitive definition of a global sport, then we had our 105th country in the history of the Olympic movement winning a medal in Paris. And that has been sensational, from St. Lucia, Pakistan, and of course Dominica. And tell me any other sport that on the opening day of a competition is celebrating a medal from Ecuador. So that, for me, tells me the sport is moving in the right direction. The structures that we put in place are really reaping that dividend. And it is really important we do not take our foot off the accelerator. I said after Budapest, the red carpet is out in front of us. We continue down that carpet right the way through to LA, which will be a huge and important moment for the sport. But between that, then, of course, we will be, I hope, with you all in Tokyo next year for the 25 World Championships, which again lends us huge opportunity in a very, very important marketplace, and the 2027 World Championships in Beijing. So thank you for being here this morning. I hope these games have worked for you. We've enjoyed your company, and thank you not just on high days and holidays, but for the support you give this sport 24/7. We do appreciate it. And if I may make a small personal thanks, it's to Mark Van Turak, who I know is at his last Olympic Games. He will retire to what I know is a very good wine region of France. But Mark, thank you for your assiduous and passionate support of the sport for so many years. Don't be a stranger. Thank you. Jamie, back to you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are ready to open to the floor. And, well, look, as Mark has raised his hand, I'm sorry, but it's only fitting. I think Mark has a first question.
Je ne vais pas perdre mes bonnes habitudes. Vous avez une traduction?
No? Okay.
Okay, I speak in French.
Well, okay. I mean,
Ouais.
yeah.
I can translate in English.
You're
but if you
going
have
to really
traduction-
test me here.
Je vous l'ai dit, Seb, je continue à parler en français. Le président Thomas Bach a annoncé hier qu'il ne demanderait pas une modification de la charte. Donc ma question est-ce que vous serez candidat à la présidence du CIO? Et sinon, dans quel laps de temps annoncerez-vous votre décision d'être candidat ou de ne pas être candidat?
Mark, thank you. Look, I've always made it clear that if the opportunity arose, I would obviously give it serious thought. The opportunity has arisen, and clearly I need to think about that. The Charter's pretty clear, by the way, about timings here. So this is only, at best, a consideration. Look, I have been involved in the Olympic movement for the larger part of my life. I've chaired an Olympic Games from bid through delivery and 2 years of legacy after that. I've been privileged to compete in 2 Olympic Games. I've chaired a National Olympic Committee, and I now have the best job in the world. I'm president of the #1 Olympic sport. So look, these are experiences that if you put together, I and other aspects of my life, I think would be beneficial to the role. But look, my experiences are clear and probably broader than most, but there are other potential candidates here who have good qualifications for that role. We're a diverse group of people, global people, at the International Olympic Committee, and there are certainly candidates who would fit that bill. If I might make an observation, there is a talented membership. That membership needs to be embraced and probably put to better use, because there are some extraordinary talents there. We also have a clear, I'm talking about the Olympic movement, there's a clear charter, clear governances, clear concepts of fairness and opportunity for all, and democracy, and that is, as the President said yesterday, that we take very seriously. So actually, if you believe in good governances, you have a laser-like focus on the need to innovate and to change. I would encourage others to consider that within the movement, because choice is important. I take that very seriously. And I think the membership needs to have a good range of quality, qualified people to look at. So, yeah, that's where I sit. But, again, the Charter's very clear. And that's currently where, my head is.
Thank you.
Tracy Holmes from the Australian Radio Network and the Sports Ambassador podcast. So, Seb, should we take that last answer as a yes then?
No. This is, look, the decision, the announcement was made yesterday. As I've said, the Charter is very clear about that. So, no, this is but as I've said, of course I'm going to consider this.
Just my actual question now is, could the two men please comment on how significant Paris has been in being gender equal Olympic Games? And Thomas Bach said yesterday that this is the Games of a new era. And so where do you see your sport heading into that new era, and how significant it will be? Thank you.
Well, Tracy, my commitment to gender equity, gender balance. We're the only sports organisation in the world that has an we have a gender balanced executive council. 13 women, 13 men. We got there 4 years in advance, and that's, if you ask me, one of the things I'm probably proudest about is when I came into athletics, we have always been 50-50 on the field of play. I'm from the age of 11, like John. You know, we've come through the athletics club system in the UK. From the age of 11, when I joined an athletics club, I've been getting on club coaches, going to meet the coaches' gender balance, and that's the way it should be. It was very clear to me when I became president of the sport, though, that there weren't enough women in positions of seniority. We've still got a long way to go in encouraging more women into administrative roles, but that is beginning to really change, and you can see that across our continental organisations. So yeah, I've been in other roles in my life where I didn't do as much as I should have done, and I always said if I was in a position to shift the dial, I would, and we have. So gender balance is really important. Where do we sit in this new era? We're spearheading it. We're spearheading it. If you look at the decisions that the sport has made, if you look at the innovations that we are beginning to embrace, and the recognition that there has to be a laser-like focus on what our product is. And that's what we're currently undertaking. The first 4 years of my presidency were putting out fires. The second 4 years were doing all the things that we probably should have done in previous generations, but we didn't. We kept kicking the can down the road because these decisions were easier to sort of leave for somebody else, and it fell to me to do a lot of that. The final 4 years, which I'm sort of 1 year into now, has to be about what does this product look like? Does it remain salient and exciting in the lives of young people? We have to be tough about the things that are working in the sport and tough about the things that aren't working in the sport. And that is where my head is. So where are we? We're spearheading that, I think, in the Olympic movement.
John.
Yeah, just to build on that, I mean, athletics really comes to life at major championships, and no bigger global moment is the Olympic Games, obviously. So it's so important that the sport puts its best foot forward, and I think we absolutely have. I think we come out of these games in an incredibly strong position. I'm really excited about the advert, the shop window for the sport that this has represented, and actually the gender equity of that advert has been really strong. I mean, arguably the strongest performance here has been Sydney McLaughlin in the 40-metre hurdles. I mean, epic performances. So, we come out, to pick up on Seb's point, in terms of growing a new generation of stars with at least as many female household names around the globe as male names. And we were both at the marathon final this morning. I mean, what Sifan Hassan did this morning was epic. I don't know how you sprint that fast after 42 kilometres of the toughest marathon course in the world. But, I mean, there's been so many great moments. And actually, just to, again, we are trying to be as data-driven in all our decisions as we possibly can be going forward. So we've done an awful lot of research over the last 2 years, an awful lot around, for example, the Budapest World Championships last year. And some of the research that we got back there, both from a broadcast audience and the stadium audience, is that actually the amazing performances of both men and women are equally appreciated. So there's no two-tier in athletics. And in fact, the research, interesting enough, that came back from the 100 metres last year from Budapest. Obviously, we haven't got the data yet from here in Paris. But actually, the women's 100 metres was actually a little more appreciated than the men's 100 metres. But both were up there, believe me. So I think we're in a good place. But as Seb said, we're not in any way. We don't take that for granted, and we carry on the drive. But hopefully you agree we've come out of these Paris Games in good shape.
Thank you. Wakako.
Thank you. I'm Wakako Yuki from the Yomiuri Shimbun, Sep. I won't ask you what if you would, but I would like to ask you to share with us your thoughts on a vision of the future Olympic movement. You have shown us that you take leadership and you're not afraid of changes, innovation, as well as always try to have sport as a center. From that point of view, what do you think the IOC as well as Olympic movement would need into the future? And especially, how the sports, the essential part of sports value, to spread the value into people's heart in the world. Also, incidentally, 2025 Tokyo, if I may. Yes, we were very impressed by the full stadia here in the morning, especially even in the heat. And what would you think Tokyo would need to do to follow up in that footsteps? For instance, of course, home team, in a saying, home team's medal would be one of the key driving force. And here we have first gold in javelin, women's in history, things so forth. Would these kind of effort, sporting effort, also contribute to the full stadia? Thank you.
Wakaku, let me deal with the second part of your question first, if I may. Tokyo has all the assets to be an outstanding championship. We were there in 1991, and people still talk about those championships, the epic competition between Mike Powell and Carl Lewis. We are moving, as you know, we've moved those championships to later into September, so that the welfare of the athlete is absolutely critical. And it is, we're dealing with it's becoming a bit of a cliche that we're dealing with a complicated world. I can't really remember a time when the world hasn't been complicated in one way or another, but obviously global climate change, given that governments seem, less sure about some of the policies they need than even 5 years ago, is something that sport is now going to have to deal with, and that's not we can't be naive or coy about that. So moving those championships slightly later in the year is important to us, but it doesn't fundamentally alter the bigger challenge, which is that we are going to have to look at the global calendar. We are going to have to discuss, as we have within the HQ, about maybe moving some of our, the marathon out of that time of the year, where if you really are committed to the welfare of the athletes, you don't stick them on the road in August or September. Those are a lot of things that John and the teams are focusing on now. And I'm delighted to be back in Tokyo next year. I did make a commitment to your governor, who has just been elected for the third time, that the very first opportunity we had as a sport to come to the stadium and have that stadium with people in, we would take, and we did. And I know there's a lot of support, and already tickets are beginning to fly off the shelf, which is a good sign a year out from a championships. The broader question you've asked is a really important one. And look, let me be blunt here. We know that the Olympic Games is fundamentally about sport. I've sensed in recent times that sport, although everybody knows that's what they're coming for, that it's sort of, in a way, slipped down the agenda. And don't get me wrong here, and I choose my words carefully. Don't get me wrong here. I've heard a lot in the last year or so about solidarity and empowerment and sustainability and ED&I. And look, they're health checks. And every good organisation should have those at the heart. We do in World Athletics, and we're not the only organisation. It's not how we should be defining ourselves. This is a sporting organisation. And I don't really need to belabor you with all the values that sport brings. We know that. We know that. We know it's the most potent social worker in all our communities. We know, used properly, it's the smartest and deftest diplomat. We know these things. But it is going to be really important that international federations and the ecosystem understands why sport is really so important in this. And, you know, the other things are really important. They are absolutely the essentials of good organisation, but that's not how we should be defining ourselves. And I think that my view here, and not just in Paris, but in the last few years, is that sport is going to have to make sure that it is really punching its weight in this space, because at the moment we have some challenges.
Hi, Sebastian. So Samir Hamoudi right here for New World Sport Africa. And this is a question on Africa. If my count is right, we have 24 medals for Africa, which is good, but not great compared to some other edition. But there are some positive medals and some positive results. I have 11 Africans in the semi on the 100 and 2 in the finals. Women and men also on the 200 meters, so the sprint looks good, and long distance, we're used to it. My question is, what's your politics with World Athletics on Africa to make sure you develop athletics? I know there's the training center in Dakar, Lomé, and all that, but is there something specific that you have in mind that you could develop? Talking meeting, maybe budget, something like that. What do you have in mind on Africa?
Well, in simple terms, we spend more as an organisation on the development of the sport in Africa than any other of our continental associations, and there are another 5 of those. I don't need to be reminded on a daily basis of the importance of Africa. The history of track and field in the last 20 years has actually been the history of African athletics, and even from my own career, you know, I know the importance. So yeah, we take it extremely seriously. One of the things that I think will help, and I hope it's a modest contribution, but it will help, and that is the discussions that I've now been having for some time with cycling around a joint venue where cross-country could return to the Winter Games, and that would give Africa a legitimate and proper handhold in the Olympic Winter Games. Continental Tour is a very important concept for us, and we have got now Continental Tour events in Africa. That was the policy to breathe new life into our into one-day meetings, and the importance of Africa to us is huge. We know that this is a continent of rich talent, but we also know there's a tyranny of distance that makes life complicated. And actually, we talk a lot about AI in rather generic terms. One of the uses that we really can put to AI is that it can help some economically challenged countries to identify talent in a way that we're still slightly analog about that, you know, we still want to put coaches on the ground, and we think that, you know, it's about bricks and mortar. AI can be hugely helpful to emerging and establishing countries, and that's something that we will clearly look at. And going forward, you know, we know that the objective has to be to stage a World Championships in Africa. We've had 2 World Cross Country Championships in my time at World Athletics, and one of them as president. We've had a World Junior Championships and a World Under-18 that admittedly doesn't exist as a concept anymore in Nairobi, and they've both been good events. So the challenge here, and we work closely with potential federations and organisations in pursuit of that. So there's a lot going on, and I've got a strong council with good African representation on, and we will continue to focus on those challenges. And there are challenges, there's absolutely no question about that, but the benefit at the end is huge. We need more African countries winning medals, and we need the match funds as well to enable us to do what we're doing, and that is in large part what I will be focusing on in the next few years.
Thank you. Matt.
Seb, Matt Lawton from The Times. We've seen you absolutely plummet down the 800-metre rankings in the last few weeks. You'd have come 5th last night. Does your generation, does the previous generation just now have to accept that the dial has shifted with technology, with advances in nutrition? But from the perspective of running the sport, you talked about Simone Biles being wowed by the speedy athletes. Do you think you've now got a more spectacular sport because of this technology? Like, do you welcome it more than ever now because of what's happened over the last 11 days, the speed of the races, the times that they're running? Do you know, people like you are, as I say, you've gone from 3rd to 8th in a few weeks. You know, is it good? Is it good? Do you think it's good?
I'm trying at this moment to think of how to answer that without saying yes and yes. Clearly, you want a bit more. So, are we better off for technology? Indisputably. Has that technology not just made our sport more exciting, but actually also helped athletes have longer careers, because the R&D that is going into that shoe technology is also actually a protective technology. So you've got athletes who are, you know, look, again, Jamie quite helpfully carbon dated me this morning. So, you know, I often tell this story that my sister and one of my daughters were with me not that long ago. One of them was wearing a pair of shoes which she thought was incredibly cool. And I said, by the way, I used to run 50 miles a week in those. And the other one was wearing a pair of, I'm going to have to brand it here, Dunlop Green Flash. And I said, actually, I won my first road race wearing those. So, you know, you probably wouldn't walk your dog in those shoes now. And athletes had relatively short careers, particularly the endurance athletes, because we were asking them to do things. Derek Clayton's a classic example. Derek Clayton was running over 100 miles a week. David Bedford in my own country in stuff that was not that protective. So the technology for me is really important, because it doesn't just make our sport more interesting and exciting. And of course, look, there is a balance. We now have a unit that, you know, and working alongside the shoe companies that for the very first time has put some parameters around this and has started to help define, you know, where those parameters are. But no, and look, we could be, if you'd said to, it's a bit like somebody saying to Roger Bannister, you know, when I walked around the track at Iffley Road making a documentary with him 30-something years ago and took one of my road shoes off, and in fact both my road shoes weighed less than one of his running spikes that he broke the 4-minute mile in. And I'm sure if you went back to Rudolf Harbig in 1936, who ran 1:46 on concrete tracks, he would have probably said, well, I could probably have run so much quicker. And the reality is I probably would have run quicker, and I might not be down at 8th place now on the ranking list, but I welcome it. And it's a sign of it's a sign of progress. I don't want to be the federation president that's the equivalent of the computer says no. We have to embrace technology. We absolutely have to, but we are also a regulatory body, and we have to make sure that we get the right balances.
John.
Yeah, let me just build on that, because there's no doubt about it, technology is helping performance. And when we look at the statistical analysis from these Olympic Games, I think this will be the greatest track and field meet we've ever seen. I'm absolutely sure about that in terms of the average level of performance, which is jaw-dropping. But we as an organisation have absolutely decided to embrace technology. It's the right thing to do. In fact, we've even at times modified our rules to make sure that we can allow it to develop. I'll give you an example. This is the fastest track that's ever been laid. And we changed our rules last year so we would allow different surfaces to be laid for some of the field events compared with the track events. So we could have the ultimate surface for whatever discipline. In the past, that was not possible. I think it was the right approach. But at the core of all of this is integrity of the sport. And, we are the regulator when it comes, for example, to shoe technology. We have a team in place that works collaboratively with the shoe companies. And what we're really comfortable with is yes, technology is rising, and the speed of change, as it is across the world, is changing at an ever faster rate. But we're ensuring, and I think we're achieving this, the fact that everybody has access to that technology. So you can win, for example, an event here in Paris wearing a shoe of any of the major shoe manufacturers. Clearly, every lane on the track is exactly the same for each athlete. So yes, technology is improving all the time in athletics, which is one of the factors helping performance to increase. But it's even across the board. So the element of fairness remains, and the most talented athletes are still crossing the line first. And I think our job as a regulator is to embrace technology but make sure at all times the best athlete, the most talented athlete, is the one that crosses the line first. And I think we're achieving that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are.
Hi, Sebastian. Rutvik here from Hindustan Times newspaper in India. A couple of questions on the javelin from the Indian perspective. Chopra growing back-to-back from Tokyo and Paris. How do you see his stature now as a global sort of track and field face?
Sorry, how do I see? I just didn't.
How do you see Neeraj's stature growing now as a two-time medalist from Tokyo to Paris? And the second question is, a Pakistani and an Indian finishing 1-2, what does that mean to global athletics?
Having Indian heritage, I know what that means in both those countries, and that wasn't lost on me the other night when I was sitting with the Indian Federation, and my friends from the Pakistan Federation were not that far away. There was some, as we would say in America, there was some bragging rights. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think it's fantastic because, first of all, that was a sumptuous competition. It rather, I hope, exemplifies what I mean about the sport moving both in the track and the field at pretty much the same pace. And look, the thought that somebody would come here. If you'd said to Chopper, you're going to throw 89 metres in the Olympic final, I think he'd have probably taken that. In fact, I did. He's at my. There are a few of us here from a very fine university in the UK called Loughborough. In fact, the guy sitting immediately behind you is a graduate there. But Chopper, of course, spends a lot of his time at Loughborough. I spoke to him not that long ago, and he gave me a distance he thought he could win with. He just met somebody on the night who was, just extraordinary. And it's very, very good for athletics in South Asia. India is an important market for us. It really is. We've just come to a relationship. We've formed a relationship with Tata, who will become our broadcast partner, and we will be working very closely with them in trying to help develop the sport at a regional level as well. So, I'm a big cricket fan. So I also know that, we've now got young people talking about athletics when, recognising that cricket isn't the only game in town, and that too has been important.
Thanks. Oliver, then Sean.
Hi, Oliver Brown from the Telegraph. Seb, under your leadership, you've obviously established a strong and a clear policy on DSD athletes in the female category, and as such here in Paris, unlike in the women's 800 at Rio, you've had no issues. You look at boxing, by contrast, the last 2 weeks, there's been an absolute maelstrom on that front, and both boxers under the spotlight have ended up with Olympic gold medals. Can I ask you what, as somebody who's led on this, as somebody who has daughters, what are your personal takeaways from what's happened, and do you think it's a failure of leadership on the IOC's part?
Look, If you don't mind, I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts, but what I will say is you have to have a clear policy. This isn't a nice to have. You have to have a clear policy. And you have to put the flagpole in the ground, and you're never going to satisfy everybody. And it is a sensitive subject. Of course I recognise it's a sensitive subject, you know, and I always try where possible to couch my own language on the basis that it was a member of my family that was being discussed in that way. But I am elected to do a few really clear mandated things. And one of those is to be absolutely unambiguous about the importance of women's sport. John quite rightly talked about it a few moments ago. You know, our female athletes have absolutely carried our sport in certain eras. They've been the box office. And we have to preserve that. And you never, you know, this is, you know, there are societal issues. I absolutely accept that. I'm pretty libertarian, those that know me. But for me, this is a really, really important issue. And you have to have a policy, and it has to be clearly communicated, and you're never going to satisfy everybody. But the reality for me is very simple. I have a responsibility to preserve the female category, and I will go on doing that until a successor decides otherwise or science alters. We have a gender diverse working group. It's chaired by Dorian Coleman, who's a law professor at Duke who knows a lot about this area, not just in terms of the science, but also the cultural, the political, the legal landscape. We have a transgender athlete on that working group, so we're not just sort of closing the door and being hermetically sealed on it, but it is really important that you have a policy. And if you don't, then you get into difficult territory. And I think that's what we've witnessed here.
Thanks. Sean.
Sean Ingle, The Guardian. It's been a spectacular athletics programme. Clearly the sport has momentum with sprint, with this. Budapest last year as well. We all love that. How can it keep that momentum? I mean, I'm reminded, going back to London 2012, everyone came out of that games thinking, I'm going to watch more track and field, I'm going to watch more other sports. The football season kicks off, and then naturally lots of people's eyes concentrate on football. How can track and field keep the momentum and, you know, the brilliance of the last sort of whatever year, 2 years, and keep it going for the next 1, 2, 3 years, so that people perhaps have come to the sport for the first time here, seen Sydney, seen all the other great athletes, stick with the narratives and the brilliant athlete up to LA and beyond?
Yeah, look, Sean, it's a great question, and it's the holy grail, isn't it? It's the holy grail for every sport. Every sport has its own individual challenges because we're different, but there is one immutable challenge, and that is how do you remain salient and exciting, and how do you grab new audiences and younger audiences? And that is, as John articulated a few minutes ago, that's what we spend most of our waking hours thinking about. The 2026 event in Budapest is going to be really important. I think that will be a game changer. It will be, you know, you've heard me talk about it before, it'll be the 3 nights of athletics, top 16 track athletes, semi and final, the field events, one straight final. It's not going to be every discipline, and yeah, you know, that's not going to satisfy everybody, and we're not going to compromise on that. We know what's working in the sport, we know what's not working on the sport, and it would be an abrogation of duty to be sitting there saying, well, look, you know, we know what's not working, but, you know, one last heave will do it, or suddenly the public will come round. We do need to address this. And LA is important to us. The American market is a difficult one. You know, and even people that in their own careers have had big magnesium moments in the sport, it's not shifted the dial dramatically. You know, one of the challenges we have is the paradox of I can't remember a more talented and broader based team out of the US which I think says an awful lot also about the quality of coaching that we're witnessing in the United States. But those athletes that have competed here are being mobbed walking out of a stadium and are still walking through their own hometowns in anonymity. And that is something that we need to address. And I had good conversations here, both with Gene Sykes at the USOPC and Max. And I said, look, there's a tripartite group here, and this is our moment. We can't sort of allow this to, glide path gently into anything other than a really successful LA28 and build on from that. So yeah, we do need to do that. Netflix has been hugely important. At its height, it sort of hit, I think, Jamie, number 6 on everything that was being broadcast. It's been by a distance the most popular sports series in Netflix in the last few months. I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to say this, but we have got a second season that's being filmed at the moment, and I think that will be equally exciting. We've got other documentaries, and it's interesting to me that actually we talk about Netflix, and that's important, and we also are in discussion with EBU about another similar type of series. But actually there are lots of athletics. There's been a sort of cluster of athletics documentaries. There's been Linford. There was the magnificent Daily documentary, which if anybody hasn't seen it, I really do strongly advise you to watch. So, there's a lot going on beyond the curtilage of the sport, which tells me that there's an aptitude and an appetite for building on that.
Just a couple of other comments to back that up, because we are hugely ambitious about modernising the sport, future-proofing the sport, innovation. Seb's mentioned a really important element of that, which is the new World Athletics Ultimate Championships, which will drop in 2026 to make sure we have a global championship moment every single year, which is important. But we're doing an awful lot more in addition to that. So, for example, Council only earlier this year made the decision to reconfigure the summer season, so we always finish on a major championships. That starts next year in Tokyo. So the narrative of the season will build towards the biggest moment of the year, which we think is really important. But it has to be more than just major global moments, albeit that's obviously when we reach the most eyeballs. So we are looking at our week in, week out competition, the likes of Diamond League, the likes of Continental Tour, and saying, how can we push the boundaries there and make that even more popular, make that more coherent a structure. And we're also looking at the individual disciplines as well. So, for example, we have a high-level meeting coming up in 2 weeks' time in Switzerland, where we're going to test new concepts, including, for example, new disciplines like the mixed 4x100. I think mixed events have really worked well here, both in our sport and others. So let's see if there are other opportunities. So we're doing these things, but I think the commitment we always make to the sport, to the athletes, is we will not introduce change for the sake of it. It has to be strongly data-driven, and it has to test well, and it has to make a positive difference. Then we'll introduce it. But we are determined to keep this energy going and this momentum going, that to make sure that we keep the sport moving forward and as popular as it possibly can be.
Great, thank you, Eddie.
Seb, just kind of on the American angle, and correct me if some of these assumptions or things I'm saying are wrong, but there are a lot of people there who are a little confused about where the Diamond League meets are going to be shown in the U.S. And I know that I don't know how much of that is your call, and I don't want you to start ripping on a partner, but I guess the question's like, how important is it, that somebody who was watching this week and saw all that stuff can actually go find the next event? I mean, that seems like a basic.
Yeah. Yeah. My brother's an American citizen. It's the weekend rant from him that I get, is where do I find this stuff? And look, that is a challenge. We made a judgment I've talked about Budapest 26. John talked about Budapest 26. We talk an awful lot about the importance of all sorts of platforms, quite rightly. 2, even 3 screens. That's the world, our kids and grandchildren live in. But we must never overlook the importance of free-to-air TV. And we made a strategic decision that we would not, when it came to Budapest, simply chase the best deal we could get on narrow channels that, where you probably get more people watching petanque on a wet Saturday afternoon in Nice than are watching what we want. And it's really important. And yeah, there's an element of loss leader there, but we do need to make sure that when we've got events on, people know how to access them, that they are ideally free to air, and that's not always easy, but that's where we really sit at the moment. And television is hugely important to us. I sort of keep reading these learned articles about all sorts of things, but television is still hugely important to us. But, I shouldn't overlook the importance of other platforms, and digital is huge, and, we know that. But we need to get that stuff on free-to-air, and that is very, very important to us, and we need to be able to show where it is. In fact, we now have an app at World Athletics that's very clear about, if we've got a Diamond League event on and you're living anywhere in the world, how are you going to access that? So we've got live streaming, we've got our own YouTube channel. There are all sorts of ways of doing that. But look, that is, Eddie, that is a challenge.
Lord Coach, Brent Reid from News Corp Australia. I wanted to ask you specifically about the women's 1500 last night, and also from a purely selfish viewpoint, Jess Hull's run. I don't know if you're aware, it's been 50 years since an Australian won a middle distance medal on the track at the Olympics, and she broke that, drought. I just want to get your perspective on her run in 1500 last night.
Well, I can happily answer that question, given that my proudest boast in the sport, I was never beaten by an Australian. So I saw Jess performing in Monaco when she broke the 2,000 metre record, which was outstanding. I saw her last night because obviously I was there when she was getting her medal. I think it was one of the great performances, and she's matured as an athlete. She's mentally mahogany hard, and she knows that she's got a potential that I don't think she's even begun to tap. So yeah, it was fantastic, and actually the whole the Australian track team is, again, if we're talking about the Americans, that's probably one of the more improved federations in the last few years, and again across a bandwidth of skills. So yeah.
Okay, well, I think a question on the 1500 metres is a nice way to...
Oh, the women's race. You wanted me to talk about the women's race generally. Well, faith is outstanding, in any generation, on any metric. Then I actually think she's the best female 1500 metre runner of all time. And she's extraordinary. I did make the mistake at Christmas of running on a treadmill alongside her, and I thought I was doing quite well until I realised she'd been on there for an hour and she was warming down as I was still trying to catch my breath. But no, she's a fabulous, fabulous athlete.
Well, thank you, everyone. That's it for us now. We are off to party with Snoop, and we will see you next year in Tokyo for the World Championships. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. It's your pen.
Thank you.
Well done.
Good.
Yeah, we'll speak. Yeah. But I also, look, I can give you a bit more colour to that.
Yeah, no big deal.
Yeah, no, but it's a great question.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I said 3, didn't I? I saw you use that. Yeah, that's good. But it's been a great training, right? Yeah. I know, absolutely. When is that record from? Ours. Yeah, because it's the Olympic record as well. Yeah, that's like 1988 or something. Yeah. That kind of